Hi, this is Megan Jax, and I am here with Creative Memories Birthday Jubilee collection. They have the wonderful project playbook for this whole set that shows you how to create 6 different pages. There's 4 single-page layouts, and then there's one 2-page layout. And what I've done is I've taken that playbook and I have gone through and done some revisions to the cut guide to be able to spread out the materials in the decorative collection to be able to make all of the single page layouts to turn them into 2-page layouts. You will of course need some additional cardstock to be able to do that, but you'll be able to use all of the same decorative materials. You don't need any additional decorative, the designer paper. We'll still use one set out of the Fast2Fab inspired paper. To do this, you are absolutely going to need the project playbook. And this is available as a download from creativememories.com. There'll be a link in the description below. Or you can order it as a physical printed booklet with your next Creative Memories order. If you did order the Buy It All bundle, you were probably able to get that within your order there. You will need this though. This is going to be very difficult to put together without these directions. The cut guides that I have, the alternative cut guides and the alternative assembly directions, are simply supplementary. They are not going to have, there's some pieces that we don't alter the cuts at all. And so you will need to do those. I'll walk you through cutting them, but I don't have the measurements at all on there. You'll need the Creative Memories project playbook. So you will want to make sure though that you do have the 2 sheets of additional alternative cuts that we're going to be doing, because we will be subbing those out. And I will tell you when we get to them, if you have a copy that you're happy to write on, you can definitely do so. In fact, let's do that as we go through. I've got my cutting guide. This is Creative Memories Project Playbook. You can see I have content here and I've made notes in this. I probably should have printed a new copy for the class. But what we're going to do is I am going to go ahead and just grab a marker, and I'm going to show you the ones that we will be doing significant altering. Designer paper 1, we are definitely going to change. So go ahead and just put a star or something beside that, so you know you need to look at the alternative cut guide for that. Designer paper 2, there are some changes that we will make there. Designer paper 3, I have it just listed here. We're going to cut a second strip. We're going to stick with the original cut guide, and then we will come in here to make an additional cut once we get going. Designer paper number 4 with the orange dots. There's just some modifications. I detail them, but we're going to be pretty much following the one that's in the playbook. Designer paper number 5, you can see that I do have an added piece in there that we need to do. Designer paper number 6, where they have cutting a circle out of the middle, we're going to definitely do some changes to that one. That was one of the only ways I was able to really get the, I think it's the 3rd layout, or maybe it's the 2nd layout, to expand to 2 pages. So definitely designer paper number 6, we are going to be adjusting. Flip over here to the next page of our playbook. We'll also look at the next page of our alternative cut guide. Definitely making some changes there. Designer paper 8, we make some changes. Designer papers 9 and 10 are Fast2Fab inspired papers. They have the balloons on them. And I mention these down here at the bottom, and I say you could either cut off the borders from the paper, or you can leave them on and you don't have to worry about mounting the paper to any additional paper. I'll show you we'll walk through what that is when we get closer to putting that particular layout. That is that's layout number 5 number 5 in this. And then the cardstock that they have you cut, designer papers 11 and 12, you will still need to cut some cardstock. I don't necessarily follow their pieces here, I don't think. I just list out what you're going to need. So you can make it work from what they have listed, but we will walk through that a little bit more. The one additional thing I do have in here is I do list a designer paper 14 orange watercolor. We need to cut some additional pieces, especially for this very first, the first 2-page spread that we're going to do. We need to be able to cut these mats here. And it's a two double layered mat using designer paper for both of those. So we will have to cut an additional sheet of orange watercolor and an additional sheet of blue stripe. All right. So let's take a look at our materials we're going to use. I have my samples here. I'll bring them out as we are diving into each individual one as when it comes time for assembly. But here's our Birthday Jubilee designer paper. So we're going to go ahead and come back to our original, the beginning of our cut guide. And we're going to work through each paper. I mentioned before that we are going to need to use the alternative cut guide here for designer paper 1, where it's the watercolor paper. In order to get a 2-page layout of this, we're going to cut a frame. We're going to cut the middle out of the watercolor paper. So let me show you. Here's our two blue watercolor papers. The opposite side has the daisies on it. We're going to cut out of the middle. And this is a change from their cut guide because by cutting out of the middle, what we're able to do is we are able to create some frames that we can mount those Fast to Fab papers on if we want to. So I would go ahead and cut these as frames. And then you can kind of make that decision later down the road. Do you want to go ahead and cut the Fast to Fab papers to fit, or do you want to do something different with those frames? But we need 10 by 10 squares. Let's cut them as frames. It's going to give us the best use of the materials later. So we're going to start off with these papers here. We're kind of just going to work our way through your pack of paper. So make sure you have your designer paper close by, and we'll pull papers as we need. I also have 3 sheets of, I have 2, but I think I'm going to need 3 sheets of baby blue. I have 6 sheets of bright white. They'll be the base for 3 of our 2-page layouts. And then I have 2 sheets of blue. So I've got the designer paper pack. I've got the Fast to Fab paper here. We only need the one that has the orange with the balloons on it. 2 to 3 sheets of baby blue, 6 sheets of bright white, and 2 sheets of blue. I'm going to set those to the side and I'll pull them as I need them. And we're going to work our way through the cutting guide. So we're going to grab our trimmer. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut both of these papers with a 1-inch frame. So to do so, I'm going to line my paper up here on the left or the right side that's flush with over here on the logo side. Bring it down to 1 inch here at the bottom. And I will line my, the white line here up at 1 inch. If you like to set your binder clips, you could do so. Go ahead, put your white mark at 1 inch, set a binder clip to the outside edge. And then you can come down here to the other end to 11 inches. Your white line will be at 11 inches and you'll set your binder clip. You're going to need to do this 8 times, so 4 for each sheet. So if you do want to set those binder clips, it can be helpful, let you get into more of a little bit of an automatic groove. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Just make sure you line up here at 1 inch and cut from clip to clip and rotate. And just keep working. Cut all 4 sides so you can get that 10 by 10 square out of the middle. And then you will have that nice frame that you can use for that final layout if you don't want the dark blue edging on your Fast to Fab paper, or you will be able to save it for another project. So here you can see I've got my 10-inch square. I'm going to pull that to the side. And I'm just going to pile these pieces up, I guess. Well, we'll see. The frames, because they're kind of delicate, I'm going to set these kind of off to a special spot. I just don't want them getting pulled and torn at. So I'm going to set those off to the side just because I want to make sure they're taken care of. Here's my second sheet of the blue watercolor paper. I'm going to go ahead and trim that at 1 inch, the 1 inch frame. Keep working here. Many of these designs can be carried over into other collections, so don't think that you just have to do this with Birthday Jubilee. If you've invested in the cut guide and the everything else, you can do these layouts with other collections. So there's my second 10 by 10 and my second frame. All right, so now I can remove my binder clips. And I'm ready to move on to designer paper number 2, which is the orange watercolor. And I mentioned here, I put a star next to it because I need to use my alternative cut guide. One of the things to note when we were expanding layout designer paper, or excuse me, layout number 3, project 3, you can see here, we have all those bars. We have 4 bars in the middle of the page, and we need to make sure that we get duplicates of each of those 4 bars to be able to carry over. So that's what we're kind of doing in here. Any place that you see decorative elements, we need to, that we see pieces of paper you use as part of the decor, we need to be able to duplicate them over to the second page. So what I've done here is where they say 2A, originally 2A is 2 inches wide. I have reduced it to 1 and 3, or excuse me, oh, it says 11 3/4 on there. You'll have a correct copy because I'll fix that. It should be 1 3/4 inch. Both of those should be 1 3/4 inch wide. By reducing them to be just a little bit smaller, I could get both of them on this page. Instead of being 2 inches, they're 1 3/4 inch wide. So I'm going to come over to my papers and I'm going to find my orange watercolor. The reverse side is the streamers. Now, what I want you to think about is on my layout, my sample that are on the in my samples, I flipped one of the papers over to show, instead of using the watercolor side here, I use the streamers. Now, to be able to do that, you will want to make sure that your streamers are going the correct direction. So if you want to flip the paper over before you start going, if you think you want to use the streamers, we want to make sure that these are cut, that their streamers are going up and down when we're making these cuts. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut these, and I'm going to use 1 3/4 inch. I need 2 strips that are 1 3/4 inch. I'm going to cut 2 of them. I'll need to reduce these down to 11 inches tall, but I'm going to cut 2 of these at 1 3/4 inch each. And then I will flip, and I'm going to go ahead and take off 1 inch off the bottom of each one. And these are just scraps. You don't need those. Now, these are going to go as part of, they go with layout number, I think it's layout number 2. Yes, they go with layout number 2. But you can kind of, if you need to, just stack the pieces in a pile based on maybe their colors. That might help. So we have our 2 pieces here. We do need to ribbon cut these ends. I have a ribbon, my ribbon cutting punch, so I'm going to go ahead and do that just because I want to get that done. So I'm just going to come in here. I'm centering it within the punch. This isn't sized to do 1 3/4, but you can make it work. So there's one of them cut. And I'll go ahead and cut the next one. Let's see, this is going to be the bottom. So ribbon cut those ends of these, a piece 2A and 2AA. I got real creative with the numbering of them. And these are going to be used in layout number 2. Next up, we're going to be cutting some mats from this piece of paper that are going to be in layout number 1 or spread number 1. And they are cut to the same size as in the cutting guide. So they're 4 1/4 inches wide. Let's see, 4 1/4 by 3 1/4. 4¼ by 3¼ You'll use these with 3x4 photos, and you need 3 of them. And then you'll have a scrap left over that we're going to punch. So there's some mats, and this is going to be for punching. Now we have a piece left over. Now let's look at our alternative cut guide. I need 2 2x8 pieces out of here for 2E and 2F. So I'm going to actually go ahead and turn this on its side. They're 8 inches tall, so I'm going to cut it at 4 inches. And then I'll cut 2 2-inch segments from this piece. And this is going to go for layout. These will be the bars in layout number 2. We actually need a total of 4 of these. That's why we're going to have to cut a second piece of orange watercolor paper. And we'll do that toward the end. It was one of the additional pieces that I had to add. So there's 2 of the 2x8s. If you want to use a pencil to mark these would be 2E and 2F. This is scrap. Next up, the blue stripes, and this is where we have to go back to our cut guide. This is the original cut guide from the Playbook. This is why you definitely need to have your Playbook. So here, we're going to go ahead and grab our diagonal stripe paper. The opposite side of that paper is the candles. Okay, so it does tell us here that we need to pay attention to the direction of our candles because we want the candles to be going upright because these will be pillars on layout number 3. We don't want our candles going to the side. We want them to be going up and down. So if you need to, cut it with the candle side up. We are going to be cutting just like they have here. However, it says 3E, where it's a 2x8 piece, we need to make 2 of those. And you can see we have plenty of scrap left over, so we'll be able to cut them right in there. So I'm going to go ahead and measure here. For the first, we're doing 3A, which is 4½ wide. That's what we're going to start with at 4½ wide. I'm going to rotate this, and these go to 3½. These become the mats as we're double matting the pictures, the 3x4 pictures in layout number 1. This piece here is a scrap, but here you can see if we come back up and grab those orange mats, we have a nice double mat for layout number 1. So you can actually, if you want, pair these together. They're going to all go in layout number 1. With the piece remaining, we need to, in the original directions, you need to be able to back your presents border, here you can see, with a darker piece of blue. They have us cutting a strip out of this paper to do so. You need, if you're going to use a white base for layout number 4, you need to cut a darker piece of blue that you will back behind and do a little bit fussy cutting to get it to work behind the presents. What I did to kind of get around that, and because I thought, well, it'd be nice to see what these layouts look like on something besides bright white, is I put these layout number 3 together on regular, just blue cardstock. So you see, I don't have to cut that blue strip. So if you think you want to cut it, you can go ahead and do so. You've got space in the paper to be able to cut both. So you can we can cut 2 1-inch strips to be able to back those the punches with. If you're making it exactly like I did in my alternative options, you don't need these 1-inch strips. We're using dark blue, we're using blue as our base paper instead of white. But if you're using white as your base paper, you're going to want to cut these strips. I'm going to cut them just to make sure that you can get everything you need out of this sheet of paper. So we go 2 strips that are 1 inch each. These will go behind your baby blue stacked presents border. And now I need 2 strips that are 2x8. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn my paper and I'm going to cut off 4 inches at the bottom. The reason I'm going to do this is going to give me plenty of scrap paper to punch. I need to punch 3 cakes. I have plenty of scrap paper here to do that with. Now I need to cut these into 2-inch pieces. So piece 3E is a 2x8. I need 2 of those. I need 3E and 3EE, which are 2 inches wide each. And we'll be using the cake, or the candle side of this paper. And it's going to go over with my orange 2x8 bars. And I do have some scrap left over. Next up is the orange dots paper. And the orange dots paper, the only change I have in here, and this is personal preference, they have us using orange mats that are cut to 3 3/4 by 5 3/4. They go on the very last layout, so layout number 5. You can see here they have 4 pieces here that are 5 1/2 by 3 1/2, or excuse me, that's for the photos. The mats are 5 3/4 by 3 3/4. I'm going to be honest with you, I think 4 by 6s are just fine. So I'm actually going to cut these as 4 by 6s. And that's just it as you desire. So I'm going to grab one of my orange papers here. It has a cupcake on the back side, and I'm going to cut these. I'm going to cut 4 by 6 mats. So I'm going to cut 2 4-inch wide strips, and I'll cut each of these in half. So those are my mats for the last layout. Now this section here, I need to go ahead, and I'm still going to go ahead and cut the piece, the banner piece they have, piece 4E. I'll cut that to the same size that they recommend. And I think to do so, I'll go ahead and cut this at 3 3/4 wide. Actually, to be a little more economic on my thing, I'm going to go ahead on my paper. I'm going to go ahead and cut this piece. I'm going to cut a piece to 4 3/4 inches tall. Then turn it and cut it at 3 3/4. That way I'm left with the biggest piece of scrap paper here. Hold on to this paper. We're going to use this paper where they talk about punching, and they want us to cut some smaller 1 1/2 by 3/4 inch pieces. We'll get that all out of this, but we'll cut those pieces and punch those pieces when we're actually putting together layout number 1, simply because we don't want to lose those in the chaos of cutting everything else. So I'm going to set this over with my punched piece, the other piece of paper that I know I'm going to punch. Now this is going to be a banner cut. So to banner cut this paper, I think we'll banner cut that at the very end. You can make the decision if you want to banner cut it now, but I'm going to wait. I'm going to go ahead and just put this to the side with my other pieces. They all go to that final layout number 5. So they'll just get put to the side here. I am going to grab my second piece of orange stripe paper, or excuse me, orange dots. And I need to, in page designer paper number 5, or paper number 5 that we're cutting, you can see here we need 2 by 9-inch pieces. We're just doubling what's there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut this to 4 inches wide. And I'm going to trim off 3 inches at the bottom. That will give me 9 inches. And then what I can do is cut this in half at 2 inches. I'll have there's 2 pieces here that are 2 inches wide by 9 inches long. And what I need to do here is also ribbon cut those ends. So if you have the ribbon punch to do that, it's real easy to do, especially on these pieces that fit in the punch. And I am just putting this down here just far enough. I don't go all the way to the end of my ribbon punch. I don't want to lose any length. I just come in here and I look at the back just until the ends of my paper clear, and then punch. I have my orange banners up here that I cut. Remember the watercolor orange? I'm going to put those with that because they go on the same layout. All right, that big piece of orange dotted, you can set that to the side. That's a big scrap. Next up, we are going to dive into cutting our first of plaid paper. So this is one where definitely have a change to the cut guide because of trying to make sure that we can get enough pieces to be able to expand the layout into two pieces. So the original layout to make this one, they mounted a piece of like 10 by 10 white on top of a full sheet here, well, that you cut the center out of to get a circle. However, if I wanted to carry this over, we actually do cut a second sheet of the plaid paper, so I didn't have two full sheets to do that with. So what we end up doing is we go ahead and we needed, yeah, I would just say I tried to get it to work, but it wasn't going to work the way I wanted it to. So trust me on the process of this, and we're going to use the alternative cut guide to get the pieces that we need to be able to have two pages that look like they have that plaid frame all the way around them. All right, so our first one, designer paper 6. The first we're going to do is we are going to cut, I needed to double check here. I need 5 half-inch strips out of this plaid. 5 half-inch strips. Come over to half-inch, which is our first solid line to the right of the cutting mat. And we're going to cut 5 of these. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we'll cut 1 more. 5. Now, we're going to grab our jumbo circle, grab your 13 by 13 cutting mat as well. We're going to grab our jumbo circle, and you are going to need your green and blue blades for these. We're going to use the blue blade first on the inside track. And what I'm doing is I am bringing my piece down here as low as possible that I know I'll be able to get my green and my blue blades to cut. I'm going to cut my blue blade first on the inside track. It's going to give me my smallest center circle here. Blue blade inside track. You are going to want to make sure you hold your jumbo circle in place. You don't want it to move in between your cuts because we're ultimately going to make some rings. Okay, so there's 1. It's released, it will go. The second, we're going to use the green blade on the inside track. Just going to double check something really, really fast. Because now I'm questioning whether it's supposed to be the green blade and maybe I was supposed to use the red. It's the red blade. I say the green blade, but it's the red blade. So use the red blade. Red blade. Okay, I'm sorry. It is the red blade on the inside track. They have us using the green blade in another project, and I wrote it down wrong. So your directions will be correct. I've got basically a draft here. Red blade, inside track. I'm going to move this middle out. Red blade, inside track. I'll have to have a little caveat there of the mistakes that I tried to walk you through. At first I was like, wait a minute, that looks like a really thin. Need to see, can I lift my ring out? Yes, I can. That's a success. Okay, there we have the ring. The rest of this is scrap. So you can kind of hold on to it and do what you want with it. Put your jumbo circle away for the moment. We'll have to come back to it. All right, so we need to cut our circles in half. So let's go ahead and do that. To cut your ring and your other circle here in half, you're gonna bring your trimmer and you're gonna bring it down here to the lower end. And it's gonna just sit in, very, very bottom here. You just make sure it gets nestled in right down there. Bring it down so it hits in there, and that'll give you center. What you're going to want to do though is just rotate it until you feel like you've got a plaid here, so you've got some references to be able to line it up so it feels like center. Like that feels pretty good. Like my plaid should be fairly straight. I'm going to cut top and bottom, so 2 half circle or 2 rings, half rings, and then we'll do the same thing with this circle here. I want to make sure I get it as best possible. And there we go. I have the rings and half circles and so forth. And I've got my little strips. You don't want to lose those either. You have 5 of those 1/2 inch strips. So I'll just put those all to the side. All right, now it is time to move on to designer paper number 7. And designer paper number 7, this is our second piece of plaid paper. I do want us to use the alternative cut guide here, and I want us to come in and we are going to use, we need to make some more of our 1/2 inch strips. We need 3 additional 1/2 inch strips, and I want you to cut those first. And the reason I want you to cut those first is because it's harder to cut smaller strips when you're working with a small piece of paper. So even though I have it over here on the left or the right side of the cut, which makes you feel like you should start over here with piece 7A and work across, I want you to cut those 1/2 inch strips first. So I'm going to go ahead and cut 3 of them. That's going to give me a total of 8 1/2 inch strips. I'll be able to use those to frame out 2 pieces of paper. So there's 1, and this is the second. I need 1 more. There we go. Now, from the rest of this paper, I need piece 7A, which is 3 inches wide. I need 2 of these 3-inch wide pieces. These are going to go from layout number 5. The final layout, just some fun plaid in there. So those are 3 inches. And now I have this piece left. And when I did my initial sample and I put things together, I don't know that I have enough to be able to get, you need 4 inches and I don't. So we'll go ahead and use this final piece. I am going to turn it to the side. I need 2 2x8 pieces out of this. So I'm going to cut off a big chunk at the bottom so I have a nice big square left. So cut off 4 inches, scrap, and now I'll cut 2 2x8 pieces. So these are going to be pieces 7C and 7CC, which is going to go over with our candle and our orange paper as we're working through to get all those bars to go across, I don't know, it was layout 2 or 3. All right, so we're done with designer paper number 7, the plaid. So designer paper number 8 is the blue stars. It's like a light blue, has the stars. The opposite side to that is the balloons. Now, I do I altered this one because we need to be able to get 2 a little bit bigger than half circles out of our piece here. You can see in the original, they had just a big circle here that you end up, covering up a good portion of the circle, but you see a little bit more than half on the layout. So I needed 2 circles that are a little bit bigger than half. So instead of doing 1 whole circle, we're going to come in from each direction. You see that on the cut guide. We're going to come in from each direction and we're going to cut bigger than half inch or half circles here. The other thing I wanted to call out here, instead of using one column of 3 by 12, what we're gonna do here is we're gonna cut 3 by 3 squares of our balloon paper, and we just have to put the square at the bottom and the square at the top, because our photos and our circle here will cover up what's missing in the middle. So the first thing we are going to do is we're going to cut those 3 by 3 squares, 8 pieces 8A and all of its little companions that are below it. So I'm going to come over here to 3 inches. It doesn't really matter. My balloons are facing up and down, which is what we want. But since we're cutting 3 by 3 squares, you can rotate a square however you need to. But if you are making layout as it matters, if you're following the Creative Memories cut guide and just going to do a single page, you will need to make sure those balloons go right side up. So 3 inches, I'm going to rotate this and cut 3-inch squares. I'll have a total of 4 of them. I'll use 2 on each page of that layout. So there we go. There's my balloon squares. Now this large piece of blue star paper is where we're going to go ahead and we're going to use our jumbo circle again. And this time we use the green blade. This is where we use the green blade and the jumbo circle. Now what I want you to do here is I want you to keep track of where your middle is. If you need to, use a pencil line across the middle, or you can just keep an eye on it on your template, just to make sure that you don't go beyond the 6-inch mark when you're cutting. So I'm just looking to see my 6-inch mark is going to come across here. I am lined up. Make sure you're lined up on your cutting mat. You don't want to be, pushed too high or too low. 6-inch, and I am really making sure that I am just over halfway here. I have my jumbo circle. Here's the midpoint of my jumbo circle, which you can see I'm almost a full inch up from the bottom, which is probably more than I need if I wanted to bring it down, but I can see 6 inches. I am definitely below the 6-inch mark. And here I'm going to go ahead with my green blade inside track. I'm going to start at the top and work to each side. So there's my first one. And since it's stars, it really doesn't matter which direction it goes. Same here. It would have mattered if you wanted to use the reverse side for the balloons, because you can see my balloons will be going to the side, but I don't really care because I'm going to use the blue. We'll do the same thing, but this side it doesn't matter. I can cut it as big as I want because I just need to make sure, since I've already cut the other half, don't have to worry as much on this side. Because the paper isn't secured all the way around, the paper wanted to pull a little bit. So I'm just holding it with my hands. And there's my second half circle. And then we just have this as scrap. I don't know what you want to use it for, but you can hold on to that if you want. Might need it for punching. All right, so that is the last of the cut stuff that we're going to do at the moment. Well, we'll cut the mats too. They have the piece 11 and 12. I want to come back to those in a minute with the mats. Sometimes mats, depending on your layouts, you may or may not need the sizes that they have you pre-cut the mats, so you can kind of decide later if you want to add your mats or how you want to do those. But what I want to do is I do want to come in here and cut the other 2 pieces, designer paper 14, which I've added this. So this is the orange watercolor. We're coming back to that second watercolor paper because we need more of the bars to go on the layout. I think it's layout number, it was 2 or 3. And we also need more mats for layout number 1. So here we go. We cut these. I am going to go ahead and cut a piece that is 4 inches wide. We need two 2-inch segments, but I want to get that big chunky scrap at the bottom. So I'll come out here to 4 inches, rotate this, cut 4 inches off to give me a 8-inch piece. And then I'll cut it in half at 2 inches. And these will be those 2-inch bars. I have a whole section of these now. A nice arrange of those for my layout. This is scrap. Now of this remaining piece, I am going to go ahead and cut 4 additional mats. They are 3 3/4 by 4 3/4. So I'm going to come over here and measure to 3 3/4 inch wide. I'll cut the other one also at 3 3/4, and then I'll come in and cut these down smaller. So 3 3/4, both of these are 3 3/4 wide. Turn it and it's going to come to 4 3/4. Same thing, 4 3/4. These are 3 3/4 wide by 4 3/4 tall. If you kept track of your other blue stripe with the orange, these all go together. These are part of layout number 1. But I do need to cut, I need to grab that second piece of the diagonal stripe. The opposite side is candles. I need to go ahead and make sure that I cut the 4 by 5 mats that go with the other orange ones that we just cut. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this. I'm going to go to 8 inches wide. And that's just going to, I can cut off 4 inches. This is my big piece of scrap. We have a big scrap here. This is a big piece of scrap. It is 4 inches wide. I have a 4 or 8 inch wide by 12 inch piece. And from this, I'm going to cut off 2 inches. This is scrap. And here, I'll be able to cut this down to get those mats. So this is cutting it at 4 inches wide, which will be cutting it in half. Rotate and cut at 5 inches, which cuts it in half again. So now we've got the mats. We have 7 pairs, room for 7 photos here. So that'll be nice. Okay, so designer paper, if we go back to the original cut guide from Creative Memories, designer paper 9 and 10, what they want you to do is they want you to cut off, or the recommendation was to cut off the blue stripe here, the diagonal blue. The designer of this particular paper, of this project Playbook, prefers, they use a lot of white, bright white backgrounds to do inking and things on. And so that's what their option was, to show you could just take the borders off. I'm gonna leave the borders on for this particular variation. I did do it for this layout. You can see I trimmed off the blue borders here. They say to cut, I think it's a 1/2 inch off all the way around. Yes, you cut a 1/2 inch off all the way around. I did that, and then I ended up mounting them to the frames that we cut on our very first set of paper. You can see on the back. But I'm not going to do that for the sample because I want you guys to see what it looks like if you don't cut those blue borders off. So I'm going to leave my 2 Fast to Fab papers alone. And for the mats, I list here that you need to use 3 sheets of baby blue cardstock. So we'll go ahead and cut those. You may want to wait. The only thing you absolutely would need to do is, for sure, is you need to punch your stacked presents border. I need 5 mats that are 6 by 4. So I'm going to cut some 4 by 6s. And I'm just going to stack these mats up. So there's 1, 2, and this is going to be 3 and 4. I'm going to do one more at 6 inches. Now, if you come down, you'll see that we also need a one that's 4 by 4. I've cut the 5 4 by 6s. I need one that's 4 by 4. So I'll take this piece here and I am just going to go ahead and cut it. Now I think my baby blue cardstock is a little wide, so I'm going to trim it down, make sure it's absolutely 4 by 4. So I got 5 mats, excuse me, I got 6 mats out of one sheet of paper, which was my 5 4 by 6s and one 4 by 4. From my next piece, I need 4 3 and 3 3/4 by 5 3/4. So I'm going to come over here, cut this at 3 3/4. And I'm going to have to cut that then at 5 3/4. I tried on this one to get these to be a little bit bigger. I like to use as big a mat as possible. I like my photos to be as big as possible. But really you need to have the smaller ones that are 3 3/4 by 5 3/4. It just, for the layout, it works better. So trimming these down, you need a total of 4 of these. These are going to go on the second to last. So it's a layout number 4, I believe. So those are our 4 3 3/4 by 5 3/4 mats. We've already cut our 4 by 4. Now we need 2 3.5 by 4-inch mats. So I'm going to trim this out. I'm going to take this down to 4 inches wide. Rotate and cut to 3.5. And then we do have a big chunk here that you can save for scraps. Now I'm going to need to use a third piece of the baby blue, and that is so that I can get my 2 stacked presents punched, this 2 borders. So here's my stacked presents. And here is my border maker system all ready to go. Now, when making these borders, we are going to actually need to reverse the opposite side because of the way we want these to sit on the page. And so because I'm using cardstock, it really doesn't matter that they are, because I could just flip it over. If you were to be using a designer paper, you would have to pay attention and you'd have to cut one with one side of the paper. And then flip it over to do the other side. But since I'm using cardstock, it's easy enough for me just to flip it over on the design itself. All right, so there we go. And we do have a big piece left over. You put it in with your blue scraps. Okay. So I think we have pretty much worked our way through. I do mention here, there is a designer paper number 13. You can see it's on this page here where you cut that 11 by 11 inch square. We don't need it because of the way we're putting things together. So I mentioned that here. You don't need it if you're following the alternative assembly option. Okay, so now it is time to start assembling our pages. So for this, I am going to hunt down my alternative directions. The first the first layout we're gonna do here, I'm gonna get my second cutting mat up here so we can see how this is all going to come together. We are gonna need two bright white base papers for this. Those are gonna be your base layouts. So I've got two bright whites. You will want to have your, oh, what are they called? You're going to want to have some of your other elements here. Um, you're going to want to have your artsy add-on set that has the mats and the layered embellishments. We will use our watercolor paper is going to be mounted to the middle. All right. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to use I'm going to make sure my designer paper is lined up, or excuse me, my bright white cardstock is lined up on my cutting mat here, because I'm going to use the cutting mat to help me make sure I line up my square in the middle. And I'm going to put some adhesive on. And you've got a 10-inch square here. So you're going to be 1 inch in off of each of the corners or each side. If you have a T-square and you want to use that, you can maybe just eyeball it. There you go. And then at this point, after you get these pieces on, if you want to do that doodling around there, if you want to draw those pen lines, it's a nice little added feature to the layout. I do like it on there. And it's meant to be kind of rustic, rough looking. So don't feel like you have to grab a ruler and make them super straight. It's meant to be kind of doodly. And you can just add those in. And this is the time to do it before you start adding all of the other elements so that you're not having to like peel things up a little bit so that you can get your pen in underneath. All right, so now it is, one of the things that's nice about this particular set is we do have the artsy add-ons, they have the new mat packs, using the Ziploc bags, but here's our artsy add-on. So one of the things that I decided to do here is I did want to go ahead and kind of show how these go together in the original designed layouts. They just kind of use the pieces separate of each other, but I thought it would be fun to show you actually how an artsy add-on kit works. So I do want to just take a little bit of time here quickly to show you when you have your artsy add-on kit, all the pieces here for the embellishment clusters are numbered. So you just kind of sort them out based on that. And you're going to see it goes together really quickly. I'm just looking at the back and I am putting these out there. And they're easy to sort. And then once you have them sorted, you can actually assemble the clusters if you want, or you can leave them separated. Okay, so I know I need to use embellishment number 5. So I'm going to use a little bit of, let me see, I had pulled out some of the new thin foam squares that were available with the most recent adhesive buffet, and I want to add those on here. So I'm going to use regular, just put it on flat here for this piece, but then I'm going to use the thin ones and I'm going to add those for the foam squares. And then this will be just the perfect little embellishment to put in the middle of my cluster. And using those thin just gives you a little bit of a pop without too much. So I have my other ones. I'll come back to those. You could put them all together if you want. If you're wondering, well, how do I know how they go? Remember, you have the little card here that shows you how they get worked in. So they're kind of fun to put together ahead of time and just add them in as if they're already assembled clusters. So we'll come back to a couple of these. I'm not going to show you all the embellishments on all of these. simply because it starts to get, if we go clear to completion, on every single layout, it gets to be a little bit time consuming. So my goal is to be able to kind of get you to the point where we have almost everything on here, and then I'll show you the final layouts, giving you a little bit more detail as to how those final pieces are going to go together. All right, so for this layout, the next piece we needed is actually going to be out of, if you're wondering, the banner that is at the top is part of the embellishments. So let me grab my tray, and I can put all my embellishments in the tray, and there is going to be a piece in here that is the larger, there it is, I see it, the larger banner. And that will come up here at the top. And this is what I mean. If you want to put your doodle lines around your square, do it before you start adding your pieces here. Next up, we need to go ahead and add our mats. So we're going to pick up, we have our sets of double mats here. The smaller of the mats go on the left page. You'll put a piece here. And as I'm doing this, you know, as we go along here, you might need to, if you're following along with me here and you're putting your layout together, you might need to pause and finish adhering everything. As I mentioned, I probably won't take the time to do every single bit of piece on here simply because it starts to take too long. On the left page, they're going to come in here in a pinwheel fashion. And then you add, I would probably just adhere these all together beforehand. So you put these on here, kind of cluster them a little bit together. And then this piece would sit on top of those once you have your photos on there. You will want to pay attention to the sizes for the photos. Now across this page here, we do use one of the layered borders. There's some embellishments that get tucked in here. We have some large balloons get tucked in. I altered the way that I did some of the embellishments simply because sometimes they use floral at pieces where I didn't want to use floral and so forth. So you kind of make it work for you. They have room for some journaling up here at the top. You might add in some different pieces there. And then of course they come across here at the bottom with the border, but they also punch out the cake punch. So let me show you that. We're going to come back because they have it in the original directions here on how to do the cake punch. You need to punch, we need to punch the blue stripe. Someone's going to find my blue stripe. I have some blue stripe paper here. We are going to punch some orange, and we are going to also punch some of the lighter watercolor orange. So make sure you're just pulling from your scraps. We need to have 3 of the watercolor ones. So I'm going to grab my cake punch and I'm going to punch cakes with each of these. So this is a blue stripe. I need 3 of these. Now the orange one. They want us to punch 3 and they also want us to punch some backing pieces, but here's the trick. If you keep the pieces that punch out, you don't need to cut those little pieces, and I'll show you why. So when you punch your orange cakes, put your hand under here and capture those pieces that fall out and just put those to the side. Now you're also going to need to have your adhesive pen. So if you don't have an adhesive pen or you don't want to deal with those tiny little pieces, then just make sure you have the scraps available to be able to cut some backing pieces. And I need one more, and I'm not gonna be able to get it out of that piece. So I'm gonna grab, I have another. And then you need 3 of your, the light orange too. Now, for what we're gonna do here is we're gonna cut off I've got to look at this and just make sure I'm doing it correctly. Let me get my original here. Here's what we're doing. See how we're making that pretty layered cake. So we're gonna cut off, with our scissors, we're gonna cut off the candles of our blue. Okay, we're gonna cut the candles off. This blue piece, I am then going to use some adhesive. I'm going to use some Repo adhesive on the back, and I'm going to adhere it to one of my full orange cakes because I want to have the orange candles popping off the back. Great. There we go. Next, I need to put on some light orange. You can see it here, light orange frosting. So to do that, I'm going to grab my light orange piece here. I'm going to cut the candles off again. And then I need to do a little bit of fussy cutting to get that top bit of frosting cut off. You do not have to do this level of detail if you want, but there we go. I've cut that off. And again, I will come in here and it gets layered on. Now, in the original directions, they want you to come in and cut some rectangles out of the orange, and it's going to sit here behind your cake, which is super fast, super easy to do. Doesn't take hardly anything here at all to cut some backing pieces here to sit behind your orange cake, and it just pops off, gives that little bit of orange detail in there. So that's easy enough to do. It's probably easier than my second recommendation. So there we go. We got the cake all built. Cute little cake. Now, if you want to, when you actually put your cakes on here, you don't have to put the orange backing on. You could actually come in and just fill in and put in the little missing punched pieces if you wanted to. It is probably easier to do it this way, to just cut out those little rectangles, put them on the back of your cake, and it's all good to go. And you can add them wherever you want. So what happens is after you get your mats and everything put in place where you want them, you're going to come in, put down your border. You might actually need to do this after you've put your photos on because you will overlap here. So if you decide to do it beforehand, make sure you're using adhesive on the lower edge of your border so that you can still tuck your photos in here. You want to make sure you're not putting any adhesive on these places where you're going to need to tuck photos, and even up here, you've got to make sure you're leaving the ability to get your photos tucked under. All right. And then you can take your embellishments. A lot of these, the candle embellishments are cut down from, there's a larger swath of candles here, and you can cut around to get the smaller like groupings of candles. And the second page is kept very simple with just that middle cluster. And let me show you what you're going to end up with. So there's the left page, and here's the right page. To bring the cakes from the left page, I did do a cake over here on the right page, just punching an additional one out of scraps. I just thought it was nice to bring a little bit more detail over here to the other side. You will have plenty of stickers and other embellishments left if you want to add those types of details after you have your photos in place. And again, you'll have room up here for journaling if you decide you want to add that in. All right, so that is layout number 1. Okay, layout number 2. Let's take a peek at this one. All right, this is the one where we're using the banners and we have our circle ring. So you want to make sure you have that close by. We are going to again start with 2 pieces of bright white paper. If you need to pause the video to finish putting together layout number 1, that's a great thing about these recordings. You can just pause and come back to layout number 2 when you're ready. All right, so layout number 2, we are going to need, remember our banner cut pieces. So we did the ribbon at the bottom, we need those pieces. We also need our plaid circle pieces. So our plaid half circle sits up here at the top. The other plaid half circle is just going to be sit down here at the bottom on the right-hand page. Our rings are going to go in the middle and they will meet each other. So if you need to, when you're putting these together, definitely pay attention to how they're going to sit. Get one put on and then line up the other page because they will meet in the middle. Actually, I did both at the top here. Now we're going to want to use the same spacing that they use in the original layout. So they have us putting the half circle about a 1/4 inch down from the top. And then we're going to adhere the pieces on, let's see here. Those are the mats, okay. I'm going to go ahead and show you can use the, let's see, this piece sits over here. I'll follow this one as they show. So we got the watercolor side, and then we use the shorter banner, just sits about like this. Same thing over here, they're mirrored. So however you do your spacing on one side, you'll do your same spacing on the next. They have these over a little bit closer, maybe seeing a little bit of the green or the plaid coming through. You will want to grab some of your mats, and we're going to use the 4x6 mats. I think, wait a minute, I feel like maybe, oh yeah, because it covers up. 4x6s. And then over here, when I did them, I put the 4x6s in. I dropped it down just a little bit. And I came in here and I tucked this one under so the ring comes across, but you'll still put your photo over the top of that. You don't need to put your ring, to put the ring on top of the photo. You put your photo on top of there. They do have us using one of the borders, and the border is kind of tucked in here, and you really tuck that border in. Let me grab the original here to show you. You really, when you put this down, you're going to tuck your mat in underneath those balloons. So the balloons are kind of popping out. So your mat or your balloons, and you will cut off the bottom of the balloons. It's not going to go clear to the top. You're going to put your balloons on. It will hang over here by about 1.5 inches, and you'll cut that off. And then you'll add in your original details with some more things. They do have the large title. You guys will have to let Creative Memories know what you think of these larger titles that they've given us. It's kind of nice, but it takes a little more space, maybe, whereas normally we'd be able to put maybe another photo on this page, but we have the larger elements. We're kind of needing to use just 2 here, though you could peekaboo pocket these mats because they're 4x6s. And again, so here, let's take a peek at the final, because this is kind of the overall bit going on, right? The spacing. And then let's take a peek at everything completely as I added the embellishments. Let me find the second page. Here it is. I came in with another one of our artsy add-ons. It's it's set number 1. So you can see here the wishing you a happy birthday, and they just give you some ideas on how to put it together. And I did add a tag here. This would be a great spot to be able to put maybe the year of the birth. Like, are you turning 50? Are you turning 32, 21, whatever your age is? That's what I wanted. And then mixing in some additional details here. So all of these should hold, I think it's, yeah, 3.5 by 5.5 inch photos would all fit in here. All right. So that's layout number 2. Goes together pretty quickly. You can see here I did use the reverse side. If you want to see like a compare and contrast, I just like sometimes a little bit of that deeper color in here. And that might depend on your photos a little bit. Is there something you want to highlight, a color you want to highlight? Maybe there's too much orange here and you want to bring in a different color. You certainly could do that. So that's layout number 2. Again, if you need to pause and finish assembling this, definitely do so. Pause it where I show that layout, or you've got the samples here shown nice and large on your handout so you can see what they look like all put together. And of course, embellishments and so forth are just recommended. You can adjust as needed. Okay, so now layout number 3. That is the one where we're putting all of our little plaid pieces together. So 2 pieces of bright white cardstock. We need all 8 of our 1/2 inch plaid strips. The reverse side is the darker orange. There's going to be 4 per page. You need 4 of these 1/2 inch strips per page, and we are going to kind of create that faux frame look where we're going to just put on our pieces. Now, I give you a little bit more direction here on how to do this. We're going to start off by putting at the top and the bottom, we're going to put these pieces in place. So let me grab my silicone mat and I'm going to go ahead and use some adhesive. I'm going to put that one strip at the top and one strip at the bottom. And you would repeat this on both pages. I'm only going to show you one because again, it takes just a little bit of time. All right, top, or there's the bottom, and we'll do one at the top. Okay, so we've got the top and the bottom both have a piece on. Now, what we want to do is our 2 side pieces are going to come on here, but we want to give that faux 45-degree line. So what we're going to do is we are going to come in and we're going to go ahead and cut off at a 45-degree angle. I'm going to cut one coming in towards this direction, and I'm going to cut the bottom coming in at this direction. All right, so you want to make sure your 45s are angled towards the middle of each other. So you can do that. You can use your trimmer. It's probably easy. You can use your photo trimmer too. It has a 45-degree line on there. But the first one you're going to do, you'll do one on each end, flip it over to show the opposite side, the reverse side, when you cut the second one. So here's my first. I'm going to flip my paper over so I see the back side, and that line is going to come, and they will meet in the middle, like as if they were a triangle extending. So there's one. Let me cut the second one. And since I can reverse my plaid, it doesn't matter if you were doing this with a directional paper that you need definitely, one side versus the other, you would have to pay attention. But just make sure when you cut them that you're doing one with one side up and the second cut, the other side is up. And then add your adhesive, making sure you're putting plenty of adhesive on that triangle, that skinny end. And then it's just going to come in here and should line up real nice to give you kind of that faux corner look. And you'll do this on both pieces. So this was a way to expand this layout into 2 pages without needing to use 2 full sheets of that plaid paper. I just couldn't get, because we need those big 3 by 12 bars to do the last page, I didn't have enough to be able to do 2 full pages here to do 2 regular frames. Now, you're going to come back to your 2 by 8 bars. You should have 8 of these total. You'll have Here we go. And they're going to sit on here as such. And the original directions, they do give you, they give you some space and guide on how to space these. Let's take a peek here at what it says. How far from the bottom? They want pieces 2E and 2F are approximately 1/3 or 1 3/4 inch from the left and the right edge. So about 1 3/4 from the left and the right. So 1 3/4, they're kind of tight together. Like you don't have a lot of space in between the middle. They definitely cluster more to the middle. So 1 3/4 inch this direction. And then they're going to be 2 inches from the bottom. So this is going to be your spacing. Use a T-square if you have one to come in, or use a ruler to just make sure you've got everything lined up nice and tight across the bottom or the top, whichever you prefer to measure. And then just make sure you can come in here at the 1 3/4 and line it up. So like this one should be about where this starts. Place your outside 2 and then center your 2 in the middle is going to be the best way to put this together. All right, so then some of the decorative details you come in here, you will, I made a little bit of a change in this because of expanding it to 2 pages. So what I did is the original layout, they come in here at the top with the happy, they just say happy because they use birthday here because they use happy balloons. But because I went to 2 pages, I went ahead and did happy up here and birthday down here. So I moved that birthday over to here. Instead of using a 4x6 mat here, I wanted to use more of the mats out of the mat pack. And so I can't remember if this is actually out of the mat pack. It might be out of the Artsy add-on kit. Let's take a peek. It is out of the Artsy add-on. It has the blue polka dots. So there's one that has the blue polka dots, and there should be a second one in here that has blue polka dots. It has a couple of journaling boxes, but you'll put a photo over that. So those go right in the middle, and you can have room to add your photo. This is a mat. It is out of the mat pack, and you will need to cut it down a little bit. It is a 3.5 by, or excuse me, 3 1/4 by 4.5 inch mat. So you will trim it in half. Let me see if I can find it in here. It's this, here it is. So it's this mat, you will cut it in half, and then you will actually want to come in and trim off a little at the top and a little at the bottom, and it just tucks in there a little bit better. If it's a little bit, you trim it just a smidge closer to the letters themselves. Don't go too crazy. Just take a little bit off the top, a little bit off the bottom, and then you'll come in side to side. And then you do, this is over here on this side is where you're going to use your 4x4 mat. So you'll have a 4x4 square mat, sits over there. On this side, this is where you have those 3.5, I think it's 3.5 by 4 inch mats, and they're going to sit in here as such. And they just kind of tuck in. And then what you can see here is we've gone in and added in some additional embellishments, more of those candles that you cut apart from that big wide bunch of candles, cut a bit there. I carried the next little set over here, used a sticker again with the Artsy add-on, put together one of those little clusters. I mean, the clusters are amazing. They give you exactly how they go together. You can use them as you want, but they've done some of the work for you. Go ahead and just add that on there, and then that comes in here and sits at the top. So you can make those adjustments as you want to with your photos, but everything here came together really nice and lots of fun to be able to put this one together. So, and room for plenty of photos. If you needed to peekaboo pocket, you do have 2 4x6 photos on here that you could use peekaboo pockets. You just have to adjust how you have your embellishments in place so that they can flip around. They can open. All right, so that is layout number 3. You might need to pause, take a little break there, get everything put together. We'll come back and you can put together layout number 4 with me. All right, layout number 4. This is where we're going to make a little bit of an adjustment. Instead of using the bright white cardstock, I am going to come in with the blue. I thought the blue popped everything off there, the royal blue. I don't mind the bright white, but I do like a little bit more color every once in a while. So I'm going to start off with some blue. Now, the original layout here, they use a strip of the 3 by 12 inch piece of balloon paper. Remember, we have gone ahead and we have done squares. So what we're going to do is when we do this, we're going to, here are 3 by 3 squares, 3 inches from the outside edge on both pieces of paper. We're going to give that faux, you know, like as if we have a full strip of paper there, and we don't. This just allows us to extend the use of our paper, get more out of it. So it sits like this. Now you have your 2 slightly larger than half circles, and those are going to sit over here, and they cover up that big gap. And you want to center those. I think in the directions, the Creative Memories directions, they do give you some spacing suggestions there. So let's take a peek at those. The circle is approximately 1 3/4 inches from the top and 1/2 inch from the outside edge. So about 1 3/4, which should be about centered, is really what you're looking for. The same thing over here, except for it's going to face the opposite direction. About a 1/2 inch from the outside edge. And then now it comes into adding some additional, your other details. This is where they had, I think they had us, we use our, let's see, what did it, oh, they want us to use the mats again. And I think it's mats out of the Artsy add-on. The Artsy add-on kits happen to have the pairs of mats. If you're used to the variety mat packs, where we often would have pairs of mats, one would be like a full, like as we saw before, you have one that has a full pattern on it. And then there'll be a second one that matches, but has more of a journaling box effect. So you have, this is the pairs. Those are in the Artsy add-on kit. So those sit tucked in here as such. We're just going to dry fit these pieces. Make sure you have all of your pieces. We need our borders, so have those close by, your punched borders, have those close by. And we also need our smaller of our baby blue. And those get tucked, they sit up here. They don't go all the way to the top. They'll kind of sit tucked under. And then what you're going to need to do too is you will need to get your presents, stacked presents borders on here. Now the stacked presents border, you're going to see here, we do have one, it has the bow. Your bows are going to go towards the middle of your page. So when I put this on, I'm going to actually remove this mat. And when I put this on, I made sure to leave a little bit of spacing here so that I could see the outside edge of my stacked borders or stacked presents. So you see here I have a little bit of a gap as we come up. It just makes it, I think it makes the overall design stand out better. I wanted to be able to see that full diagonal because I don't want to take the time to back these punch. If you are backing them, what you have to do is you have your 1 inch striped pieces that you've cut. You put your borders on here. And what you have to do then is you would have to fussy cut all the way around it, which I thought was a little bit intensive. You wouldn't necessarily have to. You could layer this on if you don't want to go to that detail and just put it on there. But one of the benefits to using the blue cardstock was I can get that same effect without having to back my, and do all that fussy cutting around those pieces. But that's, if you're looking for the same look that's in the layout, the original Playbook, you're going to have to do the fussy cutting around here. I mentioned before that I would have to flip because remember I want my little curved bows going towards the middle. And I'm just mirroring the layout. So that's really what you're wanting to do, is just mirror the layout. Everything will be adhered into place. Put that on. I do use one additional mat in my setup because I thought, why not? We have room on that second page. They, on the first page, the right page, or excuse me, the left page, they have, again, another very large title here. We've got some big clusters here. I went with the, from the Artsy add-on kit, there's the sweets cluster. We've got just some different embellishments here. And then the right page, I went ahead and added using one of the mats, and I think it's going to be out of the Artsy add-on. It is this mat here with the oval and the diagonal stripe. Sits in there. And then again, another one of those Artsy add-ons. Those are so fun. To be able to cluster those together with the balloons, kind of go with the balloon theme. We got some balloons up here, balloons over here. So you've got the space there to be able to do it. If you wanted to do journaling on here, you could add some more journaling in this space here with the lighter color, or you could come in and use a one of the metallic pens to do some journaling if you needed to, or add in a tag. There's more pieces in here that you could add to be able to do journaling. So that is layout number 4. So up after this is layout number 5. Layout number 5 is the one I mentioned, uses the Fast to Fab paper. So the original one, they have you cutting the edges off of the Fast to Fab paper just to go, I think just to give it a little bit of a light and airy look to it rather than a little bit of a light and airy. It's about, you're cutting about a 1/2 inch off of the side. You overall want it to be, you want your middle pieces to be about 11 by 11. If you do that, you can either mount them to the, follow the directions in there, and they have you mount them to the back side of a different set of Fast to Fabulous papers. But this is where I thought, since we had to cut those first light blue watercolor pieces out, by doing this, I was able to go ahead and, instead of using Fast to Fab paper, I went ahead and mounted them to these squares. So you will just need to do that. I know that technique. We've done that before as part of various classes. You would just adhere to your frames that you've already cut. And that's going to get you the layouts that I created originally. Here those are. You can see how they look. Get some of these pieces out of the way so you can see. This is what you get if you trim off those blue borders and you mount to the watercolor blue frames that we cut, as our very first papers that we cut, and then you come in and you add your additional. I am going to take the time, I think, except for adding maybe some of this presence detail, I wasn't necessarily going to cut up a second set of borders, to show you what it looks like here if we leave it on the blue with the dark blue frame, so you can see what that looks like. So we need to have, we're going to start off with our 3 by 12 inch plaid papers. And these get adhered. Let's take a peek at the playbook if they have the directions on exactly how far over we come. I mean, it doesn't really matter. There's a lot of leeway in this particular one. 1.5 inches from the inside edge. So 1.5 inches from the inside edge, both of these will get adhered. Now we're going to come over here to our orange dotted pieces. I have 4 mats, and those will get put on like such. And then this piece, it comes up here and sits at the top. And I do want to ribbon cut this. So because it's so large, I need to find the middle. And this piece is cut to, I think they tell us, I swear, I feel like they mentioned in here that you need to ribbon cut this one. But now I'm not able to glance and find it. So maybe it's on, peek at the original cut guide. It's not listed there. The piece is 3 3/4 inches wide. The fastest way to find the middle is to fold the paper in half. give it a quick pinch. That's my middle. And then I can just come up here, however far if you want. You can use a ruler or whatever you're going to use. Grab a pencil. I can't find a pencil, but I'm going to use just a dot tip pen or just a fine tip pen and just put a little dot. I could have done this from the back side. That probably would have been smart too. And then I am just going to cut from edge to edge. If you feel like you need to use a ruler to draw your lines, you can definitely do so. Try to make your cut in one fell swoop, one nice smooth cut. I didn't cut it very deep. It's not a very deep ribbon cut. I probably cut it a little bit deeper, but they give you the directions or the sizing here. I have 4x6 photos. So if you are using the 3.5 by 5.5, you'll have a bit of a chunkier border than they show in the sample. So you might need to take that into consideration when you're putting your photo on here. You may have to make a little bit of adjustments, but you come in with the some more of this items here. They have some really big embellishments with this set. So you're going to see we have a big cluster. There is a big cluster of presents in here that get tucked in behind. I think in the original, I altered what they did here. I used, there is a bag I thought was cute just to put down here with like the balloons popping out of it. And then of course I come across the bottom with the gifts and then other details that you can add in. But you'll see in the original layouts that they use some, they took a lot of the artsy layered embellishment pieces that I went ahead and clustered together. They use them in individual ways, but I thought it was nice to be able to add them, to use them as clusters. There's the sticker is used up here as the title is a sticker, but you have all those embellishments and things to add in once you've added your photo. And of course you have adjust as needed here. You could come in, rearrange your mats if you need to have some horizontals, or excuse me, some verticals in here. You will have more mats to play with if you want pieces here, or you have big, there was a pretty big chunk, I think, of the, I feel like there was a big chunk of the orange left over, and if I'm thinking correctly, that you might be able to cut some additional mats if you needed to, or use navy cardstock also looks beautiful. And of course the baby blue is really pretty as well. But you can see this is a the 4.5 by 6.5. So it's a little bit of a larger mat, but you could come in and add a different additional mat there. Let me see. We have a blue one. Yeah. So you can add and adjust as you need to for your layouts and make it work spectacularly. And you will have quite a bit of material left over. The decorative material, the mats, the stickers, the embellishments. That is the one thing, doing this alternative layouts, we definitely have used up a lot of the papers. I think you should have 2 sets of the Fast to Fab paper left over. And I believe you'll have 1 sheet. Yeah, it looks like 1 sheet of the balloon and stars. And yes, there is a pretty big chunk of the orange left over. So you have some pieces to work with, but you're gonna have a lot of decorative elements. If you want to do the other Fast to Fab, the other 2 Fast to Fab layouts, there will be plenty of decorative material for you to use in those layouts or to make cards, things like that with. So hopefully you have a lot of fun putting that all together. So thanks so much for following along. Hopefully you've enjoyed expanding these all to the 2 pages. It was fun to put together. I kept forgetting to mention to do the journaling detail or the line detail, but I do feel that it does, especially when you're using the white, the brighter colors. I think that pen detail can look pretty fun in there. So give it a whirl, maybe try to practice piece of paper, but just know that it doesn't have to be perfect. It can just be a little rough. In fact, I actually make myself deliberately try to wobble, because I think if you deliberately try to go straight, it's going to look, definitely look a little like if you mess up a little bit, it's just better almost you deliberately try to mess up so that you have a little bit of wobble in those lines. So, all right, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoy putting the layouts together.